In today's episode, we have Jim Rogers. Jim Rogers is a legendary commodities investor and overall very interesting individual, traveled all around the world, wrote a book about using his motorcycle across the world. And so we're going to have a fantastic conversation. So make sure you hit the like button on this side or this side to send this video out to more people. Give us a comment down below if you're looking forward to this episode. And special shout out to our channel sponsor, which is Vizsla Silver. So thank you, Vizsla. If you're looking for a silver stock, check out Vizsla Silver. And good to see you, Jim.
I am delighted to be here, Jake. It's been a while.
So my first question to you is, would you have imagined when you were looking at the macro environment and ultimately what led you, your story of what led you to commodities, and it's a really interesting story, but would you have imagined today we'd be sitting at the face of this type of global debt with, an incredible amount of people unemployed, and we're in a bizarre situation?
You're exactly right about that. We are bizarre, and it's certainly the worst in recorded history. Never before in recorded history has debt been so high. Unfortunately, the United States is the largest debtor nation in world history. No nation, I don't like saying any of this, Jake. I'm an American citizen, voter, taxpayer like you, but it's the highest debt that any nation in the history of the world has ever had. I knew for many years that America was building up its debt. I knew that our politicians were incompetent and out of control, but no, I never expected it to go this high before a collapse. We will have a collapse someday because history shows it always happens, but I never expected to get this high.
So when you mention the word collapse, I guess the question is, and no one knows the answer really, but how long can they stretch this thing out? They said they printed 20-30% of all the US dollars in the last 12 to 18 months or so. You're talking an incredible amount of money being printed. So how long can this be stretched out?
Well, that's an extremely good question. If you ask the Secretary of the Treasury, her name is Janet Yellen. She was head of the central bank. She said, don't worry, we have everything under control. We're not going to have any problems. Now, she's got a couple of fancy Ivy League degrees. So if you believe her, it's going to go on forever. No problems, never any problems. There's a theory going around now called MMT, more money today. They say, don't worry, we'll just print it. There's not a problem at all. So if you listen to them, you should not worry at all. However, I have read a little history and I've been around a while. And I know that throughout history, when you build up gigantic debts, eventually it leads to a crisis or a semi-crisis. We had a problem in 2008, as you remember. Well, since then, Jake, the debt has skyrocketed. All over even China now has a lot of debt. China helped bail out the world in 2008, but even China now has a lot of debt. So it's going to be a big mess.
What do you make of many of these big time bankers and big time, centralized financial institutions have talked about this is a moment in time for a new Bretton Woods? You've had many of these political figures also, use this same phrase of this is a time for a reset. And you've had a plethora of these various central bankers talk about removing the dollar as reserve currency. What do you make of all that?
Well, okay, so let's say we have a new Bretton Woods. What are they going to do? Wipe out the debt? Well, there are a lot of creditors who are not going to be particularly happy if they wipe out the debt. Endowments, insurance companies, pension plans, they're not going to be very happy if all of a sudden they found out the debt is wiped out. So sure, we can have a new Bretton Woods. We can all drink good wine and lots of tea and coffee, but what's the answer? And that's the problem right now, because the debt is the highest level ever in recorded history. And to repeat, America is the single largest debtor nation in world history. It's never happened like this before. So when will this end? I don't know. I'm not very good at market timing. At the moment, markets around the world are skyrocketing. nearly all markets. But that always comes to an end eventually. I'm not shorting anything right now, but I can see bubbles starting to form in some assets. So this is it's always in. Jake, I've been to this movie. I've seen this movie before. I know how it ends. I don't know when it's going to end, but I know in the next couple of years it's going to end, and it's not going to be fun.
So what do you make of the tremendous amount of people right now that have lost their business, they've lost their jobs? I mean, it's bad in America, but as an American citizen, personally in the country myself, you tend to hear just more about the incredible people that can't pay their rent and mortgage in America. But then you think about developing worlds that relied off tourism, and the government response has really we were already in a bad place before all of this happened. And now I just wonder, so do we go to a universal basic income, or what is your estimation on what happens with the incredible amount of people in trouble right now?
Well, Jake, it is certainly happening all over the world. America's not the only. I mean, we apparently, according to the numbers, have been hit worse by the virus than any other nation. And who knows if the numbers are valid or not. But it's certainly gotten worse and has not helped anybody. There are many companies, families, countries that are suffering. And it's not, unfortunately, it's not over yet. At least in most places, it's not over yet. You can come up with a universal basic income. I'm sure everybody, it sounds wonderful. But Jake, who's going to pay for it? Where's the money going to come from? That's my question again. Sure, MMT, more money today, says just print it. But Jake, I've seen this rodeo. It's not my first rodeo. I know that you can print it all day long, and it's fantastic. But eventually, that falls apart. It always has anyway, and I don't see why it would be different this time.
When you and I talked last, which was quite a while ago, gold was just off. Maybe it's highs of August, September type of realm. So it was probably high 1900s or so. And you said, I'm waiting till the euphoria wears off. So has the euphoria worn off in gold and silver? Is this something you're a buyer of now?
It's not enough for me. I'm still waiting. I'm certainly going to buy more gold and silver. Don't think I'm not. I'll probably buy more silver than gold because it's cheaper on a historic basis. But who knows? We'll have to wait and see. No, I'm not buying either at the moment, but I do plan to buy more of both before this is up. Jake, throughout history, when you have people lose confidence in money or governments, all of us peasants have some gold and silver in the closet. We have some silver under the bed over there. We forget what the politicians say, forget the academics. We're going to have some gold and silver hidden away, and I will too. And I will have more. I just don't know when I'm going to buy more.
Understood. How about uranium? Do you like uranium here? There's been a lot of talk about moving towards a carbon neutral, nuclear being one of the only things it seems like both sides of the political scale actually are not fighting over. What do you make of uranium?
Well, I own some uranium shares, and uranium is a great source of energy if you do it right. It's cheaper, it's longer lasting, it's cleaner, unless it explodes. If it blows up, it's not cleaner, but it's certainly cleaner and cheaper and more long lasting. Carbon, coal and oil and everything puts out a lot of fumes into uranium doesn't do anything except kill you if you get it wrong. So you have to get it right. But there've only been 3 or 4 major nuclear power problems in the last 50 years. So it doesn't have a bad record. I own uranium. We'll see.
So do you have two young daughters?
2 young daughters.
2 young daughters. What are the most
17 and 13?
17 and 13. And yes. When you look at the world right now, especially, considering all that's happened over the last 12 months and the trajectory that, you and I would probably argue we were already on, but we maybe have expedited this trajectory by 10 years now. what are the important things for somebody right now for the future?
Well, the most important things are to be prepared because it's not going to be fun when we have problems next time. It never is fun, but next time is going to be worse because the debt is so high. So what I am trying to do with my daughters and everybody is to make sure that they develop their own personal skills. They both speak perfect Chinese, for instance. So I'm trying to prepare them for what perhaps will be the 21st century. If I'm right, Chinese is going to be an extremely important language in their lifetime. And so that's one of the things I'm trying to prepare them for. It's no good, though, to say to somebody, look, you got to learn to play basketball if they don't like basketball. Well, my girls don't particularly like basketball. So I'm trying to learn as a parent to help them emphasize the things they like and be good at it.
How about the 17-year-old, right? She's almost 18. She's almost able to leave the nest, at least in theory. So what are the important financial philosophies you're trying to teach her?
Well, I have been teaching them since they were born that they must save their money. One of the first things I did was to give them piggy banks, 6 piggy banks to be exact, so that they would learn that when you get money, you save it. Money is not to be spent, it's to be saved and ultimately invested. And so since they were little babies, whenever they got money, they learned to go over and put it in the piggy bank. As you know, many people's lives have been destroyed because they didn't understand money. They ran up debts. They didn't have savings. They didn't invest. So the most important thing that I wanted them to learn was money is to be saved and invested, not spent. And I think that is sinking into them. So far, so good.
So when you look back at your career, you've had a very successful career, but you started just with an interest. What would you say were a couple of the tailwinds or important things that gave you the big breaks, or whether it was a piece of advice you heard from someone? What were some of the big moments in time for you?
Well, I wish I'd had some tailwinds. I'd be really successful. I wish I'd had some luck. Wouldn't things be great? No, though, I didn't know any better. I loved what I was doing. I loved what we were doing. I loved the markets. I wish they were open 7 days a week because it was so much fun. I, for whatever reason, found something I loved and I did it. And that's perhaps the best lesson for anybody, is to please find out what your own passion is and then pursue it. People who follow their passions are very happy to get up every day and start having fun. They don't really care if they're successful. Obviously, they care if they're successful, but they're more likely to be successful if they pursue their passions because they do what they love. But, even if they're not wildly successful, it doesn't matter that much because they're so happy. And being a happy person all your life is pretty rare for most people. So pursuing your passions is something that I did quite by accident. I didn't know. I wasn't in it for the money. I was in it because I loved it so much. Fortunately, they paid me and paid me a lot if we did it well. And so, but that's my best lesson that I'm trying to teach my children. Figure out what you love and pursue it. If you don't like basketball, I now know if you don't like basketball, don't bother. Figure out what you like and pursue that.
So, over the years, I'm sure you get all types of characters that, run up to you at an event or on email or what have you. And whether they're asking for advice or telling you a story where you're just meeting all types of people with investments and they're sharing their stories. What would you say is some of the biggest mistakes that you find that either you've made or that you see in investors that you've probably met tens of thousands of people?
Well, Jake, I made many mistakes. I don't think we have 4 days to talk about all of them. You want to hear about my first wife? Oh my gosh, what a mistake that was. I mean, plenty of mistakes. But every time as I look back, my mistakes were because I didn't do enough research. I didn't do enough homework. I would like to blame it on the TV or the brokers or somebody else. But looking back every time, it was because I did not do enough research. I can tell you stories and you would say, well, that was bad luck. No, Jake, it's not bad luck. It's because I didn't do enough research. And that's why I have learned that you cannot do enough homework, research, preparation. There's always more you can do, and you better do it because something will hit you out of left field otherwise.
You made a couple jokes about how you're not good at timing the market. And yeah, I've heard this is something that you've suggested throughout your career that was never a strong suit of yours. And a frustration for many becomes time it wrong, especially if you're in a commodity, right? Because they can be so volatile in a short period of time. You get in and it moves down 30%. Or what have you. So give me an idea when you say you're not good at timing the market. Well, how do you stomach if you're not good at it when your screen shows you you're not good at it? What's important wisdom for us there?
Well, some of my friends use stop losses. I have one friend who, if it puts all of his stop losses down 12%, if he's down 12% on a position, he automatically closes the position. And he's been successful doing that. So many people like that or have their own ways. I do not use stop losses. I often wish I did. I would be better off if I did. My way has always been to stomach it out, do more research, see what's going wrong. Am I right or am I wrong? Is the market just mispricing this, or have I made a fundamental mistake? I keep looking and looking and looking to try to figure it out. And if I think I'm right, I stay with it until sometimes I just realize, okay, you are a fool. Close the position and start over.
So you mentioned about the possibility of this trajectory. At some point, there may be a collapse. And I think a lot of us that are, fair to say, a lot less experienced than you, we see what's happening and it's pretty nerve-wracking, and there's a lot of retail investors that are unsure. Do I go in cash? Do you wait it out? When someone comes to you and they say, right now seems to be very frightening. Do I go to cash? Do I stay in the things that I believe in? How do you navigate that given this unprecedented time?
Well, you use the word believe, which is not a good word when you're talking about, for me anyway, for investing. Belief is not enough. You got to really know what's going on. Don't believe in belief, believe in facts, believe in reality. Make sure you know that you are right. Because if you just get passionate or hope or believe something, you're probably going to suffer a lot. So my main advice to everybody is just stay with what you know, and then there won't be too much belief. It'll be based on reality. And when things go wrong, you will know better than most what to do and how to react. If you just believe something, you're probably not going to know what to do. You're probably not going to know how to react when it goes against you. So nobody likes to hear this advice, Jake, but the answer is just stay with what you know. If I told you could only have 20 investments in your life, you wouldn't jump in and out of things. You wouldn't jump into things that you heard on the TV or something, and you would be better prepared. Because then when something goes wrong, you will know what to do. Simple guy like me who's just researching it, et cetera, will not know nearly as much as you do because I hope you know a lot more about it, and that's how you become successful. Nobody wants to hear that, Jake. It's too boring. But if you want to be successful, be boring.
So how many countries you been to?
Oh, I don't know. On our last trip around the world, I think it was 118 countries. And I've never, other than that, I've never really sat down and counted them because why? It's not going to change things, whether I've been to 7,000 or 700.
It would be pretty fascinating. You've been to 7,000. We'd have to know your secrets on that one, but
certainly would. I need more.
So
Sir, if
Go
you
ahead.
can find 7,000, I'll go.
all right, deal. So what were the most important things? You also have that pretty cool book, about cycling around the place as well. What are some of the most important memories, philosophies you picked up as a traveler?
Well, Jake, I did it because I wanted adventure. I grew up in a small town where nothing much happened. And so I wanted to see the world and I wanted adventure. And if you go around the world, I mean, let's say, I was living in New York, no matter what happened, every day, if I went out the door, whether I went right, left, straight ahead, I more or less knew what was going to happen. But when you're going around the world, you never have a clue 5 minutes from now what's going to happen, what you're going to see, who you're going to meet, whether you're going to be dead or alive, or it's just an astonishing, constant adventure. And I love that. I was very, very keen on that. You certainly ran into problems at times. I was once held hostage for 9 days in the Congo, in the middle of Africa, et cetera, et cetera. Went through some war zones. But it was since I'm alive, since I survived, I can look back and say, it was a lot of fun. If I were dead, you would be sitting here saying, God, how could he have been so stupid? He's going to get killed trying to drive around the world. But since I made it, I can tell you it was a lot of fun. But it was constant change and fun.
Did any of that type of stuff influence you at all positively with your investments in your business, even if it was just mentally, emotionally such?
Well, it certainly taught me, for instance, this first trip around the world on the motorcycle, I could see the Berlin Wall had just fallen, and I could see what was happening in the world, that everybody wanted to be successful and prosperous. Nobody wanted to be a socialist anymore. And if they did, they wanted to be a rich socialist. So communism and socialism were failing everywhere. And that was clear. And that's one of the reasons that I knew eventually there was going to be a commodities boom, because I could see what was happening out there with everybody. So that was one thing that individual countries, when I crossed the border in Botswana, for instance, a country in Africa, I could see that it was different. No bribes, efficient, quick, highways, signs, hotels, shops. I could say this is a different country. So when I got to the capital, there was a stock exchange, and I went down and I bought shares in all the companies. There were only 7 companies, so don't think I'm some kind of rich guy or something. But I went because I could see from the ground up that things were different. So it depended on the country. There were various and sundry experiences. I was mainly doing it for adventure. I was not doing it, Jake, to look for investments, but because of the nature of who I am, if I saw investments, I tried to take advantage.
Yeah, I was just curious from the perspective of the types of bizarre things that happen. You haven't done nearly as much traveling as you, but I've circled the globe in a minuscule way, and it had a profound impact on my life. And I was thinking maybe the reason you don't have stop losses, that you don't set them up, is because if you've been held hostage for 9 days, you can stomach your portfolio going down.
Well, yes, the experiences certainly broaden your horizon, teach you about human beings, teach you about yourself as well. I'm not urging people to go out and get held hostage in the middle of Africa for 9 days, but it did happen. I survived, fortunately. I went through some war zones. One general stopped us one night, wouldn't let us go forward. We didn't know why. We found out the next day it was because they had mined the bridge ahead of us, and if we kept going, we would have blown up. We would have blown up their bridge, which fortunately saved our lives, or saved a lot of problems for himself. So there were many experiences, and I'm alive. I'm happy to talk about it.
That's awesome. You've done a lot of fun things. So I thought that was interesting that you said going around, you realized socialism, communism was dead. Ironically, it's making quite the resurgence here, especially in America. Obviously, I don't know exactly what's going on elsewhere around the world, but we're seeing some failed socialism experiments, and Venezuela is not looking too hot. What's your take on that? the rise of
Whenever,
socialism.
whenever there are hard times, people look for easy answers. Socialism and communism, a great story. I mean, it sounds wonderful. We have tried. Mr. Marx was around over 100, 150 years ago. It was a good story, very good story. A lot of people liked it, and a lot of people tried it. But in the last 150 years, we have found out it doesn't work, nor does socialism work. So, sure, but people who, first of all, don't have the experience or don't read history or don't see what's really happened, love the story. But I can tell you, Jake, and given human nature, since it's a good story and it's an easy story, more people will try it when things get really bad, or try MMT, more money today. Any good story, easy story, people will try because they think, oh, that'll save us. Unfortunately, there's no free lunch.
So do you think that this is just a cycle in human history, that now the pendulum has swinged more back towards hard times, which equates to people's desire for socialism and more government control? And this is hopefully just a little cycle we're in, or how do you think about that?
People look for an easy answer, and people look for a free lunch. Nobody likes it when you tell them there's no free lunch and this is not going to be easy. Nobody wants to hear that. Even if you ran on a platform, if you were a politician and said, God, this is terrible, we're going to have tough times for a while, but we can solve the problem if we do what's right. He might get elected. But Jake, 6 months later, a year later, people would say, wait a minute, this is too hard. I didn't know you meant this. I didn't know you meant this much pain. Come on, I don't want this anymore. This is not any fun. They'd throw him out or he'd get assassinated. Who knows what would happen to him? This is just human nature I'm talking about. You don't have to go around the world to know about human nature. You read some history, if nothing else, and people will look for the easy answer. And no, I know it's not going to work. And I know it'll make it worse in the end. If you look at America in the past 15 years, people just printed and spent and borrowed huge amounts of money. After 2008, everybody said, okay, this is the only thing we can do. We have to borrow a lot of money and spend a lot of money and print a lot of money. It's the only way to save us. Fools like me said, wait a minute, guys. It's going to make it worse in the end. It's going to make it much worse in the end. It's good to be old. I don't have to worry about how this is going to wind up. It's not a good time to be young, Jake, because all the young people, people like you, are going to be facing huge, gigantic debts and problems over your lifetime. And it's not going to be an easy answer. You may try easy answers like 2008, but in the end, somebody has to pay the price. Do I like it? No, I want an easy free lunch too. Oh my gosh, I want things to fall out of the sky. But I've read enough and been around long enough to know it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, it's why I started this show that's ended up taking off. And yeah, I've faced some resistance to that. People just kind of want to talk about the hot investing area. But I'm, as a 29-year-old with a 7-month-old daughter, I can't say history tells us not only do these economic things happen, but when they happen, this is what moves. This is when people lose liberties. This is what moves towards more of a centralized government. And so, I appreciate that you do these. I know you don't need to do these interviews. So first of all, just thank you for, coming on. And it does help a lot of us. I know you don't need to do them. So first of all, thanks on that.
No, it's been fun so far.
Well, let's see if I can keep it going. So I know you're a busy guy. I don't want to keep you too long, but look, you're honest with us. This is, a lot of people aren't honest and they just think it's not going to be that bad, right? You've got Yellen saying, good times are ahead and what have you. It doesn't look like, whether it's 2 years or 10 years, the trajectory isn't too hot. And on top of that, then you move towards, as this happens, you move towards higher taxes, capital controls, more restrictive liberties, et cetera. And what would you, if you were my age and you were looking at this now, but you knew everything that you know about history and about money and investments and psychology and whatever else Jim knows, what philosophies would be important to you right now, and what do you think you'd be focusing on?
There's no free lunch. What I would urge you and everybody is to stay with what you know. I mean, it doesn't do me any good to say to you, Jake, agriculture has a great future. If you don't like being in the sun, if you don't like planting things, it'd be foolish for you to go into agriculture. Who cares what I say? If I said to you, Silicon Valley has a great future, if you weren't good at math, you probably shouldn't bother. So the most important thing is to stay with what you know. Don't go off chasing windmills. Don't go chasing the latest hot thing you hear on the internet or on TV. Just stay with what you know. As I said before, at least you'll be happy. Maybe you won't be wildly successful, but you won't be poor and struggling because you'll know enough to do well. I mean, as I said before, it's boring. But if you want to be successful, if you want to come through this, figure out what you love, figure out what you're best at. If it's languages, learn languages. If it's math, develop your math. Just stay with what you know. And that's how you're going to come through this and how you're going to come through successful.
Do you have a personal favorite gold or silver coin, like a personal favorite mint?
Well, no, I mean, what is this? This is a Chinese panda. The U.S. and the Chinese and I don't know, but I think they're probably the biggest distribution or biggest production. So you'd want something that's somewhat known and liquid. I mean, everybody would recognize a U.S. dollar, silver dollar. I don't know how many people would recognize a Guatemala silver dollar, for instance. So my advice, the ones with the biggest distribution are probably where you should focus. Canada, Australia, America, China. Those are ones that most people will recognize or at least be able to accept as real stuff.
Okay, so here's one of my last questions for you. China, it's been interesting to watch. You're in Asia, and you're very involved in the Asian markets, and I found it interesting how intelligent their government has been in focusing on commodities. We don't know exactly how much gold they have or what have you, but just getting involved with commodities, either purchasing mines in Africa or getting involved in the rare earth elements. Do you think that they're just ahead of the curve versus America in understanding the lack of investment into commodities, and on top of that, the devaluation of currency that we're in? Is it just that our politicians and our Federal Reserve governors, they just don't understand how bad this currency crisis is, and China's saying, we should be buying gold? What do you make of all that?
Well, I certainly know that in Washington, they don't understand. That part of your statement is correct. I mean, there have been times when Washington has been brilliant, but not in many, many, many decades. Looking at the same sources you do, I can see that the Chinese seem to have done a less bad job than the rest of us. They certainly have piled lots of gold. They have stockpiled lots of commodities. As far as this recent crisis, they seem to have done a less bad job than the rest of. But I don't know. You can ask me in 30 years. We'll know. We can sit around here and we'll drink beer or coffee or something in 30 years, and we'll know if the Chinese did a better job. But so far, they do have reserves, not just gold and silver, but other stuff as well. And they have emphasized the production of raw materials. Well, they know they got 400 million people. They got to produce a lot of stuff. They're putting big emphasis on agriculture because they know They need lots of food production going forward. So yes, at the moment, it looks as though they've done a less bad job. But don't think the Chinese haven't had many periods in their history where they were disasters. They have. On the other hand, Jake, China is the only country in world history that's had recurring periods of greatness. China's been on top 3 or 4 times in history. They've also been total collapse 3 or 4 times in history and had long periods of catastrophe. But for whatever reason, they're the only country that after a few decades or centuries at the bottom have turned around and risen to the top again. Is that happening again? It looks like it is. I have not figured out why, except I can see it has happened before, and it seems to be happening again. But I can also see many catastrophes in Chinese history.
So I'm considering, with everything going on, I'm kind of weighing my options outside of the United States, with my daughter and such. And, you're someone that's raised your kids outside of America, but you grew up there. And in conclusion, I'm just kind of curious, you growing up, I believe you grew up in Alabama, correct?
I did, yes.
Yeah. So what have you noticed are some of the fundamental differences from obviously different times and such like that, but looking at your daughters growing up in Singapore, how do you think that's influenced them versus growing up in America?
Well, the main thing, since my kids are school age, is I have noticed a huge difference in education. It's much more demanding in Asia. It's much more rigorous, much harder, lots more. My kids have had more homework in a couple of years than I had in 12 years. And I had a lot of homework, or at least we thought we did. So no, I can see that, and one reads this, but now I've lived it, and I know that Asian education is much more rigorous and demanding and widespread. Now, 150 years ago, I read that American education was the same. You go back and look at students' courses when they were like 12 years old or something, and it's unbelievable what they were doing in American schools 150 years ago. Well, that's the way it is in Asia now. Now, I don't know if American education is what made America great. It certainly has to be one of the things that made us great. I see that much, much, much more here in Asia than in the US at the moment. If that's a key to the long-term future, I assure you, Asia's got a leg up on all of us. My kids are doing well and adapting to it. If they weren't, I'd pull them out because it's amazing. It's just amazing how much homework. My 13-year-old is up till midnight every night doing homework. Wow. When I was 13, I didn't even know about homework like that. It's extraordinary. And we thought we had a lot of homework in my school, and we did.
And my mom was doing my homework when I was 13, I think.
Well, send your mother here. Tell her we need her.
All right. So here's my last question. We've had a couple good laughs, and I've enjoyed our time together. I know you're a busy guy, so I don't want to take you much longer, but I appreciate it. But here's my last question. Tell me the stupidest investment you've ever made.
My first wife.
No, we've got to exclude her. What's the next one?
Oh, I wish you could have excluded her. Wouldn't that have been wonderful? For that easy, that's what some of the Russians used to do. They just race them just to wipe it all out. Well, I will tell you one because I got so many. But I'll go back to the first one. It was a time in my early days where I thought the market was going to collapse, and I bought a lot of puts. Puts are something you do when you think it's going to be bad. And lo and behold, in 5 months, I had tripled my money, and everybody around me was going broke. It was horrible. And I shouldn't tell you the whole story, but on the day of the market hit bottom, I reversed my puts. I said, I am really good at this. I'm going to be rich someday. This is easy. And waited a couple of months. Market rallied as I expected. So I took all my money. I didn't buy puts this time because of the premiums. So I sold short. And 3 months later, I was wiped out, lost everything. and Jake, I look back, I sold 6 companies short. I got wiped out because I didn't have the staying power. But within 2 years, all 6 of those companies were bankrupt. Didn't matter. I lost everything first. I lost it all. But I learned a lot that, first of all, about timing. First of all, about reserves. Third, that not everybody knows what you know. And many people in the markets will do foolish things. I told you, all of those companies went bankrupt within 2 years. That did not mean they didn't have gigantic rallies coming off the bottom, off the big bottom. And so I learned a lot. It wasn't fun. Am I pleased? No. I'm pleased I learned, but it was not fun at the time. And that was one of my earliest and biggest mistakes. A lot of pain at the time, but fortunately I survived.
Sounds like you survived quite well. So for everyone listening, please make sure you hit the like button on this side or this side. If you appreciated Jim coming on, if you learned something, give us a comment down below. Comment down below Jim Rules right there down below in the comments. And just want to thank you very much for your time today, Jim. I had fun with you.
It's been my pleasure, Jake. Let's do it again. And be sure to teach your daughter how it all works. Okay?
That's what I'm working on right now.
Very good. Thank you. See you next time.